Alright, welcome back. Today I'm going to show you guys a few tricks about duplicating objects first, and then I'm going to show you how to use two different meshes and combine them together and merge their vertexes together so that they become one mesh, and you can essentially use that as a more complicated beginning to an object. So first, duplicating things. Up in the Edit menu, all the way down here, we've got Duplicate, which we've probably done already. Control D, and it just makes a copy of an object, and that's very simple. But we've also got these Duplicate Special and Duplicate with Transform menus and shortcut Shift D, which end up being much more useful for doing more complicated objects. So just as an example, let me show you. I will create a spiral staircase really quickly. So I'm just going to make a cube here in the center, and this is going to be one of the steps that we're going to use in the spiral staircase. So for the height, I'm going to just divide that in half, and for the width, let's make that about 3. That's maybe a little bit fat still, so let's do 0.3. There we go. And I want this to be in a spiral staircase, so I want it to go round and round and round up in a spiral, but that would take forever to do by hand. So I could move this out to the side, and assuming that this is our center. In fact, let me just make a central column here. So that'll be our central column, and I'll just make it about 10, and we'll translate it up 5. So there's our central column for a staircase, and I'll give it a radius of 0.7. Yeah, that should be fine. Okay, so here's our stair, right? Our first stair, and we can just put it in the old place. And I could duplicate this by going to Control D, or of course going to Edit, Duplicate right here, and then rotate it, and place it into position, raise it up. And I could do that over and over and over again. I could even be a little bit more clean about this and say, okay, this stair I want to start at 0.5 off the ground. And then this one I want it to be 1.5 off the ground. And I could figure out how many stairs I'd like to go around here. So let's put this one at like 45 degrees. Okay, and I could do all those calculations and figure it out and still have to maybe rely on eyeballing it for moving how far the depth would be, moving out from the central column. And it's just a big mess. Okay, so there is a better way to do things like this if I want to rapidly make lots and lots of objects in a pattern. So I'm just going to delete my duplicate there. The thing that would help here is if I could put the pivot point, the rotation point of this object somewhere else, and in fact we can do that. If you hit the Insert key on your keyboard, Insert may be located in a small group of keys to the upper right of your keyboard or between your numpad and your keyboard. But the Insert key will turn your manipulator into this one that has no arrows. And while it's like this, we can move and position it somewhere else, and then hit Insert again, and now that's the origin point of that object. Okay, so if I can get this pivot point right in the center of this column, it's going to allow me to just rotate each one of these stairs up as we go, and I'm going to have a much easier time making a spiral staircase. So that brings me to my second point, because I can move this right now by eye or even by the orthographic views and get it pretty close, but this isn't as exact as I would like it to be. What I really want to do is snap this to this central line right here, or snap it to the central vertex of this cylinder, because that's going to be the exact center. That's the point that I want to rotate it from. So there are a few buttons at the top of the interface that represent snapping. Right up here, we've got on the left-hand side Snap to Grid, which are these units out here. Okay, so they're rather big. They're good for positioning wide things, or if you're building to a scale, each one of these is 1 unit of width or movement, so that can help. The second one is Snap to Curves. We haven't dealt with curves yet, but just know that edges count as curves. So we can snap things to edges or hold them to edges. Snap to Points, which are vertexes, so this central vertex or any one of these vertexes. And snap to view planes, I really don't know what that one does. I've never really used that, but this last one, make live, can be really useful, but we're probably not going to use that for a while. So just think of these first three as the most useful ones, and they correspond to keyboard shortcuts as well. So snap to grids, if you look down at your keyboard, in the bottom row of letters on the left-hand side is X. The next button over, snap to curves, is C, which is the next letter over. And the final letter, V, is snap to vertexes. So they all sort of correspond: curves, vertexes, and grid, which would be X. Okay? So I want to snap this guy. Right now I'm in the top view mode, which means that as I move this pivot point around, it will not be moving vertically in the Y direction because it can't. So I'm going to hold down V, and I'm going to just move this while I'm holding down V. You can see that the central part of this manipulator becomes a circle, and this button depresses momentarily while I'm holding the button. So as long as you're holding the button, it will snap to vertexes, and you can see it jumping instantaneously to all these different vertexes. I'm just going to move it over this point and then release, and I should have a nice central rotation for that object. Now, in the other views, since I did drag it from the center, it did jump vertically. But if I had been holding V, let me move this somewhere else, like here. So if I had been holding V and just moving one of these dimensions, like the red dimension, which is X, or the blue dimension, which is Z, it cannot move vertically. But when you drag from the center, it will snap to the three-dimensional location of the vertex. So in that case, it will scoot it down. In our case, for staircases, though, it doesn't really matter where it is. So I'll just move it vaguely up into position here, and then hit insert again, and we're ready to go. Okay, so snapping is going to be a tremendously useful thing going forward, so make sure that you remember how to do it. So now I've got this stair with its rotation right in the center of this column, so I can Control D to duplicate, and I can move it up, so we'll just go 1.5, just like we did before, and what was it, 45 degrees. Okay, and that's maybe a little bit much. Let's do half of that, so what it would be, 22.5, is that right? Yeah, 22.5. So that's looking a little bit better, and I could do that over and over again. So Control D again, and move it up farther. So what's another 1.5? That would be 4, I think. Oh, 3, sorry. Obviously not. Okay, 3. Oh, that doesn't look right either. 2.5? Yeah, I don't know what I was doing with my measurements. 2.5, and then this one can be 45 degrees, and so on and so on and so on until we have a spiral staircase. That's fine, but it's not the best that we can do either. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and delete those two. We can automate that system with this duplicate special menu set here. So if I open the option box is always opened by clicking the square next to the command. Then I get this pop-up window which will allow me to apply certain things. Let me just reset, make sure that everything's reset, just in case. All of these settings, you can always do that right up here in this menu. And we can tell it to do a certain number of copies and to do something to each new copy when it does it. Okay? Up at the top of this window, we've got copy or instance. In fact, if we wanted to do additional modeling to this stair, we wanted to start here but do other things to it, we could also change it to instance, and every other stair would change shape as well. But for now, we're just going to do the simple thing and assume this stair is done and leave it on copy. So down here in this interface, we've got 3 columns and 3 rows, and each column is always X, Y, and Z in that order. Okay, first X, second Y, third Z. So this is translate X, rotate X, and scale X. Okay, so in our interface here, we can see that we want to move these stairs upward a certain amount. So we want to translate them in Y, okay, the green one, right, X, Y, Z. Let's just make it an even 1 unit. Okay, so we're going to translate them up 1 unit. Then we want to rotate them over. I kind of like 22.5. And the rotation is as if you were spinning the axes. So this is the Y axis it's going to rotate around. So rotate 22.5 for each new one. and we don't want them to scale up and down at all, so we're just going to leave that at 100%. So now the only thing left to do is decide how many copies we're going to want of this object. And since I'm doing sort of half of a 90-degree turn, so it would be halfway 90, halfway 180, so that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 to come fully around. Let's just do 16, so 2 full loops around. So with that object selected, I'm going to hit apply. And it looks like my central column is not quite long enough, but you can see that we end up getting a spiral staircase from that. Okay, perfectly going around, even divisions. Every next stair is the same distance from the previous stair because we automated the process right here. So that can be really, really useful for making things like this. And of course we could do it with like the banister or with the handrails or whatever. Okay, there is another way to do the same sort of thing, which is a little bit more organic, a little bit less mechanical than this. If you duplicate an object, move it, scale it, and rotate it, and that's all that you do, then you can use duplicate with transform, this one right here, which is Shift D as opposed to Control D before you deselect it, and it will do those same transformations over again to the one you currently have selected. So in this case, I moved and rotated the second stair just an arbitrary amount, and now I'm hitting Shift D repeatedly, and each new stair is maintaining that relationship with the previous stair. So that's kind of neat as well. Just to show you that we can do that with scale as well, why don't I just take this, I'll move it over to the left there for a start. Control D to duplicate the first one, so I'll move it over and I'll scale it up a little bit and also move it up a little bit. We'll see if we can get a pseudo staircase here. And then Shift D, and you can see that they grow and grow and move, and I kind of get a bar graph. Well, a little imperfect bar graph because I did do it by hand, but you get the picture. And that's because I used the translates, rotates, and scales. I didn't go into component mode at any point and move those bits, so it's able to duplicate it like that. Okay, so this can be really, really time-saving for things like adding rivets to objects or making picket fences. So for instance, a picket fence would be quite easy to do. I'll go ahead and just shrink this guy down. Actually, let's return his pivot to the center. There's a shortcut for returning it to center if you've moved it somewhere else. Modify center pivot right there, and it will just pop to the center of the object like that. So I'm just going to scale this very thin, and I'll just pick that face and move it upward. So I'm going to make a nice little picket fence there. Since I showed you guys how to do this, I can extrude this face and shrink it like that. Let's see, should it be thinner? How about a little thinner? Sure. Okay, and I've got all these weird arbitrary numbers here, so 10.344, 0.036, so I'm not being strict and mechanical about this, but that's fine. As long as you have a sort of precision and logic within what you make, it's oftentimes fine to just leave those numbers like that, unless you're doing architectural engineering or something like that. So I'm going to go Control D to duplicate this picket fence post, and then move it to where I think it looks good, and then just Shift D until I get the whole fence. Then the only thing really left to do is to add the posts and the supports. So I can make a nice little support on the back of the fence here. Just push it up to right where it just barely touches, like this. And as soon as I've got one, I've got the other because they look almost exactly the same. Squeeze that down a bit, make sure it just touches there. Control D. Okay, just like that. And then of course we could have vertical posts as well if we wanted to make it work like an actual fence would work. But there you go, really, really quickly making a fence like that. We can take the idea even farther because these fences do not have nails in them, right? They might need some little nails sticking out of the front of them to look completely realistic. Okay, so we could apply this same idea to duplicating nails as well. And in this case, a nail is just going to be a teeny tiny cylinder for me. So 90 degrees, let's move it over, move it up, shrink it down. Okay, and this will serve for my purposes here. It's probably a pretty big nail, actually. I'm going to have to shrink that more. And out a little bit. Okay, and so maybe I could put like 2 nails in each one of these things. Now the thing about that is if I want like 2 nails, right, on a single plank like that, duplicating this now, so Control D, moving them over there may not work properly. Let me try Shift D. Will that work? It actually does work, so that's nice. Shift D, Shift D. So it remembered per object what the distance was going to be. But this is getting a little bit messy because I've got a lot of objects in my scene at that point. What I'd really like to do is take these nails, and let's just make some on the bottom as well. Take these nails and make them a part of this plank before I duplicate them. That way, I've got everything taken care of, and I've got these objects which are less difficult to keep track of and actually represent what they are. You know, an entire plank on this fence would contain its nails, or like any other small bits of metal like protruding from it or whatever. So there are several different methods to do this, but I'm going to just show you the simplest one for now. This is to combine their meshes. So Mesh Combine up here at the top menu will now treat this whole thing as if it is a primitive. Okay, so it is an object with its own zeroed transform, rotate, and scale. You can see that the pivot point starts at the origin, the 0, 0, 0 point on the grid. So if you want to set its local rotation, you have to move it over to the object itself. Or you can use the shortcut, like I showed you earlier, of going to modify center pivot, and that'll pop into the middle of the fence post like that. So now I can duplicate these, and they will take the nails with them. So I'm going to just go ahead and go Control D to duplicate, move it to the side so that it visually looks like how far it should be, and then Shift D repeatedly until I've filled my fence up. And now they've all got their nails moving down along the fence. Okay, so that's going to work for many of your needs for doing mechanical things, for doing industrial things, mostly man-made structures. You can even use this to some degree for placing trees and things like that in nature, although it has a definite mechanical bent to it like this. If I wanted to make this a little bit more naturalistic, maybe after the duplication I could come in and grab just the random fence posts and lower and raise some of the vertexes, maybe grab the vertices that make up the nails and scoot them around as well to just give it a slightly more organic kind of feel to it. But I already had most of the work done as in duplicating the fence posts and placing them properly. So any little thing that I do is now an intentional choice and not an accident based on sloppy modeling or something like that. See, I can rotate them a little bit and it just gives it a nice kind of comfortable feeling. But 90% of the work is already done. Okay, so that is Mesh Combine and Duplicate. Ways for you guys to get a lot more mileage out of simple objects. And remember that before you do this stuff, before you duplicate like a nail, right? This is my nail, but that's, you know, honestly, it's a pretty crappy nail. You want to make sure that this object that you're going to duplicate is as modeled as you would ever want it to be. It should be as nice as it should ever look. So potentially I should have, before I duplicated them, let me just grab my selection tool, beveled this edge maybe. Let me turn it down to 0.1. Okay, just maybe, and then squeezed it shorter so that, oops, I'm just gonna have to focus in there. Squeeze it down shorter so that I had like the base of the cylinder just barely showing. Let me grab these, almost got them all. Move them up here. right? Just so that it actually looks like a nice nail. And then I could duplicate it and rotate it and do whatever I wanted to it. Same thing goes for these big pieces here. Maybe the wood needed a bevel going along the edge. Maybe there needed to be some cracks and things in it. You want to be careful about making detail which is too unique that when you duplicate it, it's obvious that you've duplicated something. These planks right here are just completely plain, and so it's obvious that they're all kind of duplicates of each other, but it's the same case that if you made like a crack in this or something, and every single one of them had a crack, that wouldn't work so well either. So be careful before you duplicate about the types of detail. Maybe make a set of 3 for variety and duplicate that and switch them around in order and things like that. But you can save yourself a tremendous amount of work doing something like that. Okay, so now I'm going to show you additional methods to add detail to your objects. Up until now, we've been focusing on just wide overarching detail, edge loops and beveling and extruding things, but now we need to get down to the teeny tiny little details. So for this example, I'm going to use a plane. Okay, just a single polygon plane. Let me hit F to focus in on it. For this example, because I'm going to show you how to make your individual vertices and edges one at a time. Now that may seem like a whole ton of work. In fact, let me make this bigger so that it's just not down at a tiny little unit scale. It might seem like a whole lot of work, but it's essential for making more eccentric shapes and also for carving in fine detail on an object. So same menu as before, we just want to grab an edge, any old edge on the object. Hold down Shift right click, and we've got the interactive split tool on the left hand side there, and that's the one we're going to use. Open up your tools panel, our tool settings, so that you can see what options are available. I'm going to hit reset tool just so it's back to normal there. And you can see that we've got a couple checkboxes, snap magnets, and magnet tolerance there. Okay, so what this is a method of drawing new edges. And so you can see as I'm hovering over this polygon, I've got this little orange dot that's popping up. Just as a global note for the future, every time you use a tool, there is a hint down in the lower left-hand corner down here on this bar. Okay, actually, wow. Display short help tips for tools and selections. I've never actually hovered over this bar with my mouse before, and it gives a tooltip for the tooltip bar. That's amazing. Wow. I guess somebody had to think about that. Like, what do we do when you hover over the bar? So whatever you're using, whatever you're doing in Maya, it gives you tooltips. And so when you choose the tool, before you choose the tool, as you're using the tool, it will tell you sort of what you should do with this tool. To use it properly. It won't give you exhaustive information, but it will give you some idea if you're using a tool that you've never used before, and so that will enable you to explore a little bit. So as you can see, what I can do with this tool is make edges. Okay, I'm going to undo that selection and do it one more time so you can follow along. Grab an edge, Shift right click and hold interactive split tool, and just go ahead and hover over an edge until you see that dot, and then click, and then move somewhere else to a vertex or to the center of an edge, and click again, and you will have made an edge. All right, you can do this as many times as you want, but when you're done, hit the Enter key, and it will commit those edges or not. This is a tool that is malfunctioning and buggy quite often. So there's a chance that if you're trying to do something that is too complicated with this tool, that it will not allow you to make the edge slice. And I'll try to give you an example of when that would happen, but honestly, it's a little bit unpredictable, so I may not be able to. So if I hit G, it will bring me back to that tool again. I can make new slices. You can see I can make slices of the edges that I just made. In between those, how about over here? How about back to the center again, and then Enter. And it made new faces. The more I do this, the more likely it is that at some point Maya will throw a fit and say, I don't want to do this anymore, and not allow me to draw those edges. But so far it's been pretty cooperative. In particular, we are currently drawing from existing edges to other existing edges. which makes this tool much more reliable. Okay? But if you look at that toolbar, you can see that we've got the ability to constrain to edges or not, and that makes this a freeform edge drawing tool. Okay? This will probably not work at all. I'm going to try to terminate it to an edge. Let's see. No. Okay, so it does not like that. There are sort of rules about how to use this tool for freeform edge creation. What I like to think of it as is if I start my edge in a vertex or an edge and then draw whatever the heck I want, and then I terminate it at another edge or vertex, most of the time that will work. There we go, that one worked. It just needs some method of understanding how it should fit within the greater context of the mesh. So beginning on a vertex or edge and ending on a vertex or edge is a good way to guarantee that. So let me undo that. And I'm going to show you how I managed to do that without turning that button back on. So here's the tool, and there's my dot, my beginning dot. I'm going to click and drag but not release, and I'm going to cross my mouse over an edge. You see how it doesn't cross over that edge? It knows that I started in this face, and it's saying, oh, you're exiting that face, so I'm just going to grab onto this edge which borders this face. Okay? So if you want to guarantee that you're drawing on an edge, just start clicking and dragging from the interior of that face out, and you are on that edge now when you release. And I could do it the other way as well. Click and drag out and release, and I've got 2 vertices on those edges guaranteed. Okay? If you want to make sure that you're on a vertex, all you have to do is the same thing, only cross over until you hit that vertex barrier. And it helps if it's in a corner, although if there was a vertex in the middle of this, I think it would stop there too. Let me just try. I'll make that edge, and I'll try from this side to drag. No. But we can use snap magnets for this. So there is an alternative. What I would do in that case is to just start here, right? So there's a corner, and then I would draw out to here. And so I could guarantee to hit that spot right there. When you're using tools, by the way, oftentimes if there's a multi-step process for the tool, you can undo individual steps for that tool by hitting backspace, not delete, but backspace. So backspace will undo that final dot that I made there, backspace, backspace, and I'm back to no dots having been drawn yet. Okay, so the tool will not complete until you hit enter, and you can undo, sort of mini undo, while you're using this tool using backspace. So there's enter and it's complete. Okay, so as long as I drag from this corner and make some sort of weird shape, and it might not work if I do something as crazy as this, but we'll see. I've been surprised before. And all the way to the edge, if I hit enter, let's see. It actually worked. Wow, I'm impressed. Okay. Then it will allow you to draw some weird freeform shape. Now this is a good time to introduce you to the idea of surface topology. Okay? So this is an idea where we want the 3D engine, either Maya or game engine possibly later on, to be able to understand our 3D information. Just assume that the most complex face that the 3D engines can understand is a 4-sided face like this one. 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't have to be perfectly perpendicular. It can be a trapezoid like this. Triangles are perfectly fine as well. So 3 or 4-sided faces are what we consider to be legal faces. Okay? This face is not a legal face. Not only is it way more complex than a quadrilateral 4-sided polygon, it's got sort of concave shapes to it where it crosses over its own path. This would need to be subdivided in order for a 3D engine to read it comfortably. Okay? Now, that first step of having made this shape is perfectly valid if you need to make something like that. So let's use an example of making like a air freshener in a car. Okay, I just like it because it is an easy recognizable shape like a Christmas tree, right? So I'm going to make a plane, again, blank plane, right? So it's got no subdivisions at all. Well, one, you know, to make it blank. And I'm going to use that interactive split tool to draw myself a air freshener. So I'm going to start up on this corner here and just define a freeform Christmas tree kind of shape. Just like this. And I could probably go and complete it all the way back up to the top, but instead I'm just going to stop here and terminate it there. And then I'm going to pick it up again from this point and continue drawing. That's something that might be a good idea for you to do. Since this is a buggy tool, I have crashed Maya a number of times with it. So as everybody I know, you may want to divide up more complex shapes into several steps instead of one. So there's my Christmas tree shape. And I'm going to grab these two faces and just delete them. And I've got this highly illegal, erratic looking polygon shape. Oops. Grab those vertexes. And I can move and scoot these vertexes around to kind of reshape it and form it, but I've got the basis there. I could be a perfectionist if I wanted to, but since it's just an example, who cares? This is a legal face, an illegal face. It has way too many sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 15 sides right now. Okay, so no good. We need to divide this up into quads or tris. So either 4-sided faces, quads, or 3-sided faces, tris, maximum, if we want a game engine to understand this type of shape. Okay, so what we do is use the same tool that we just used, interactive split tool. I may want to just turn on constrained to edges so it's more convenient. And these magnets and snap magnets, what they do is they add points within the edge that it will snap to. One will put it at 50%. 2, I believe, does in thirds. Let's see. Yeah, so thirds. And 0, I think, leaves only the vertexes, right? Oh, wow. No, it's still kind of snapping. Oh, wait. That's right. It doesn't commit until you either hit enter or click into another field. So that number had not committed yet. So 0 actually doesn't appear to snap to anything. So I'll just leave it on 1. I hit enter that time, so it committed, so that we can divide this up. So what might we do to divide this up? Well, I can see this trunk area is almost a quadrilateral already. So I'll just divide that up by clicking from one side to the other, enter, and then I'll hit G to bring my tool back. Okay, so I'm doing this rapidly. And then if I just go up like this, okay, I've got a free triangle here, 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 and here. This one is illegal, and this one is illegal still. But it's short work to sort of fix that by going like this and just dividing this across here. Okay, so now I've got a 4-sided face, 4-sided face, 4-sided face, triangle, 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 triangle. Okay? This would be legal. This should be easily understandable by a game engine, and it's fairly efficient and neat as far as how all of the polygons are ordered. Now there's other ways to divide this thing up. We're just looking for legal faces, so it doesn't have to be particularly intelligent. So let me show you a really messy kind of way to divide this up. So I'm just going to start with a couple random clicks to see what sort of trouble I can get into. So let's see. There we go. That's a triangle, that's a triangle, this is a quadrilateral. Really. I mean, it looks ugly, but it is. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it will work. Then I could do, I don't know, random shenanigans. Let's see. If I do this, right, this is a quadrilateral. This is no longer a quadrilateral, okay? I know that that line is straight, but as soon as you put a vertex in the middle of an edge, it becomes 2 edges. 1, 2. So this sort of thing would not be allowed. That makes a pentagon shape as opposed to a quadrilateral shape. So let me undo there. And let's just, I don't know, keep dividing this up. This would be a 4-sided shape, as stupid as that looks. And it wouldn't be a good idea to leave it like that. But I don't really I don't really have a full explanation as to why that's not a good idea. I know it's not a good idea from experience. Having edges which are far too obtuse or far too acute ends up causing problems. As to a technological reason why that causes problems, I really couldn't tell you. I just know from experience, you want the detail to be as gridded as possible. So while I'm doing all this nonsense, actually that would work. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me just tell you that this is not better than the first example I made. Okay? In general, for an object, you want the detail to flow in 2 directions if you can help it. Let's see, plane, and I'll blow this up and give it some subdivisions. So the optimal kind of edge flow is this kind of gridded tic-tac-toe edge flow. Even when we have creatures and humanoids, we try to get the edge flow to flow up and down the limbs and then around the limbs so that we get this quadded kind of edge flow. So if you can help it, try to divide things up like this. It just ends up being a lot neater, a lot easier to deal with, and if you have to continue modeling, a lot more convenient. Now, of course, if you've got big modeling detail that has to flow and shape and stuff, feel free, absolutely. This type of example here, so if I just move this stuff into kind of wavy, undulating patterns, is no different really than a nice gridded edge flow. Okay, this is still very nice. Okay, it doesn't matter that it's following these contoured edges. What really matters is that it's got junctions here which end up being nice straight kind of lines through the object. Okay, so that would work perfectly fine as well. But just so you know, the split or interactive split tool, I think I was calling it a split edge tool. Interactive split tool is your friend for making these types of little trims and edits. Okay, so if we liked this kind of polygon, for instance, but we just kind of wanted to round it out a little bit, this would be my go-to tool for doing something like this, right? To shave off these bits in order to have a rounder shape. Okay, and that would be a perfectly valid way to kind of round out that corner and add a little bit more detail to it. We could do it to the rest of it and so on. Okay, so this is the key to getting some nice fine-grained detail in a way that you really didn't have a way to do it before. The only other key to this is how to take away that detail on the fly as well and combine edges and vertexes together. So for that sort of thing, what we need to do is take individual vertexes and just smash them into other vertexes so that they become one vertex together. Okay, and there are a number of different ways that we can do that as well. So just imagine that for some reason these 3 lines need to be 3 lines over here, and then they need to combine into one, like at this point here. Okay, when you grab a vertex, same menu that we've been using, shift right click and hold. At the top of this we've got a submenu, merge vertices submenu, and it has 3 different options for ways that we can merge vertices. Okay, the one at the top, merge vertices to center, does not care how far apart or how many vertices you choose. All right, so I'm going to just grab all 3 of these guys, merge vertices to center. Boom, there they go. They just pinch wherever the sort of geographical center of the 3 of them are. They all combine and collide there, and now they are one vertex. They aren't just overlapping, they have been combined, and these are all faces which are attached together now. Okay, and we could do the same thing over here. If I hit G, it'll repeat that same command, and they kind of end up being where this center guy was, but that's not necessarily the way that it will work. Let me just push that guy in. Let's do this again. And you can see that they average the distance. Okay, that method is fine if you know for a fact that the geographical center between 2 things is the perfect place to put them. For instance, if I just grab these 2 and then these 2, that was perfectly fine. I know they only move side to side. This plane has no height whatsoever, and then I can always just slide this thing around. So that's okay. Okay. Sometimes that is not what you want to do though. Sometimes you want to be a bit more choosy about what combines where. Okay, so once again, grabbing a vertex, shift right click, merge vertices, and let's just do the bottom one. So we did the top one. The bottom one is the merge vertex tool. Okay. You can either do center, which I'm not sure why you would use the tool and do center. I guess it's more rapid. But I love to have the target vertex. And so with this tool, what you do is you click and drag from a vertex to a vertex. And when you release, the first one snaps to the second one and combines. So this way you can be more picky and say, I want these two to merge where these are. Okay, so it moves them over. And the same thing for these guys. I say, I want them to merge where that one is. And I want you to merge where that one is. And again, you can complete this tool by hitting either any one of your manipulator keys. So Q, W, E, or R. And we're back to our normal mode. Okay, so that tool is great. I love using that one. The only downside is that one of the vertexes has to be in the target location for that to work flawlessly, and so if you're doing things like symmetry, it doesn't necessarily work out properly. The third option is a little bit more complicated to understand, but it uses a threshold of distance. Okay, so I've grabbed, and I need to put a couple of these really close together for this to work. So let's put these guys really close together, and the rest of them are somewhat far apart. Actually, we'll do this guy should be close as well. That'll illustrate it nicely. And I'll just grab the whole thing. Okay, so all the vertexes are grabbed. Shift right click, merge vertices. This merge vertices option, I'm going to enter into the option box just so we can use it as an actual window. So this will merge any vertex which is as close as this number in units or closer. So I'll just reset it. So that's the default, I guess, 0.01. Since each one of these grid squares is 1, that's 10% of this grid square, which I think means that these three clusters all qualify. Let's see. Apparently not. Okay, so none of them moved, even though it did log that we used that command, and I can undo that, I believe. Can I undo it? There we go. So apparently I need to make this number bigger because those aren't close enough together. So we'll just do 0.1. Oh, that's right. I just read the number wrong. 0.1 is what I was thinking of. This is 0.01, so that's 1/100th of this grid square size. That's way too small. So let's set it to 0.1. There we go. And if I hit apply, that one merged, that one merged, that one merged, but the rest of them didn't move. Okay, this is kind of a cleanup and filtration kind of option. If you've been modeling something and you're not quite sure if some of the vertexes merged or not, you can use this merge vertices option to definitely squeeze them together. That said, it's a little bit sloppy to kind of rely on that to clean up your messes for you, but it is a good option just in case you need it. And so more often what I use this for, let me just get a couple 3D objects. So we'll do cubes. And I'm going to delete the faces here. And I'll duplicate it and flip it inside out. Okay, so now I've got two cubes with openings on the side. And I'm just going to push them really close together. This is more like the situation I would use for this option here. Now you can't merge vertices between two separate objects like this. First of all, it would be very difficult to select the vertices on two separate objects like this. Not impossible, mind you. You can do it. Here, I'll do it. If I can get a nice little selection, I'm going to do orthographic view for it. Okay. So it's not impossible. Those are two objects with their vertices, but these will not combine. So let me hit apply and see if it does it. See, it just doesn't know what to do. They're not the same mesh. So they need to be mesh combined first, which was that option I showed you earlier with the picket fences. So I'm going to shift select this second object, mesh combine. Okay. Now grab the vertices, and you can just select only the ones that you intend to merge if you want to, but selecting all of them won't hurt anything as long as none are as close as the threshold. I hit apply, and now this is one solid object with an edge loop running down the center. Okay, so that's a nice easy way that you can merge similar but not totally exact shapes like that. So those are the tools I wanted to cover for this session. The homework is to create a tool, some kind of tool. So here are some examples of some tools, and I just want to give you an idea of what is easy and what is hard. Okay? So in this instance, the easiest thing I would say is probably this X-Acto knife right here. The blade itself would be a plain type of shape, and the rest of it is pretty much a cylinder. Even though right here on this grip you can see that there are bumps going out, out, out all around it, that wouldn't be too hard to plan for. These screwdrivers here, these flathead screwdrivers, are really pretty easy as well. A Phillips head is a little bit more challenging than that. These crescent wrenches are another step of difficulty above those. They're not really too complicated for you to figure out, but you're definitely going to spend a lot more brain power thinking about it at that point. Then we would go on, and I'm just actually ignoring the Allen wrenches. Don't make an Allen wrench. That's lame. That's far too simple. Also, this tiny screwdriver, it's just another screwdriver. These pliers are interesting. I wouldn't recommend trying them for now, just because they're kind of a strange kind of composite shape here, but that would be an interesting sort of thing to attempt. These as well. I would say this hammer is the next most difficult, because most of it, cylindrical going through here, is easy. This wedge-shaped, and you'd need extra reference to see the actual forks in the back there. Wouldn't be too difficult. The square shape's not too difficult, but this transitioning shape would be quite a puzzle to sort of plan for. I've done this as a demonstration in past quarters, and it's always a fun one, but think about how to transition this cylindrical shape to this sort of hexagon shape back into a box shape. And most likely people want me to do that for demonstration, because they always do, and it ends up being really fun. The hardest one I would say is this pipe wrench. This pipe wrench has several pieces which are independent from each other. A main stem, which is not a cylinder, not a cube, and it's got little details on it. We've got a rotating grip point, this sliding hook on the top here. Very composite, very difficult kind of wrench to make. So if you're very, very confident looking for a challenge, that would be the thing to go for. But I would expect something like this crescent wrench would be a nice medium kind of challenge for you. And we've got some other ones here. This hammer right here and most mallets that have a boxy kind of shape are very easy to do. If you're not very confident and you need something just to kind of practice on, that's a good option, but it doesn't really explore all of our modeling tools to the fullest, and so it's not really going to push you very much. This wrench is much more complicated, another crescent wrench, but with an adjustment. Much more complicated than the original example. These pliers, again, fairly complicated, and the screwdrivers are all fairly easy. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea of the type of thing that I'm expecting, and I want you to just do one tool, one really nice looking tool. It can be a gardening tool, it can be a hardware tool, anything like that. If you have to use these methods to do it, then great. If you don't have to use these methods and it can look great anyway, then that's perfectly fine. I'm just in the business right now of giving you additional modeling techniques. It's not necessarily the case that you're going to use them every time, but I do want you to practice them and have knowledge with them. Okay?